Hello, everybody. I hope everyone's safe and sound, and I hope everyone's practicing their social distancing as they should be during this coronavirus pandemic. I hope it doesn't hit Egypt as it did in other places, but that's yani inshallah khair. I will follow Farida's footsteps and presenting my presentation via this way. All right. So Roy Scranton starts off his chapter by talking about how what he has seen in Baghdad while he was a soldier in the U.S. Iraq War, he also saw when he came back home to the States. The similarities that he noticed wasn't terrorism, it wasn't weapons of mass destruction, but it was actually how civilization broke down and how its systems breaks down during this invisible enemy that we always talk about. And for him, the invisible enemy is climate change. But before getting into that, we must understand that when he was in Iraq, what he means is that the US involvement in Baghdad and their culture completely broke down their civilization and their systems. It completely changed it and it altered it. Even though some may think it's to the better, it's nevertheless a change of culture and system and hierarchy and legal stuff. So one can always question whether that's actually good or not. Anyway, he then talks about how all these big scientists and big leaders talk about how climate change is going to hit us and it's going to hit us hard. And human civilization won't really be able to adapt to the changes that we are going to be facing. He talks about how extreme weather events will increasingly disrupt food and energy markets, forcing human migrations, triggering riots, civil disobedience, and vandalism. That's on page 15. Let's talk about the bigger picture though. It's not really only about how humans are going to panic, which he really disagrees with. He does not agree that we should panic like what we are doing now, he comes and talks about how because the glaciers are melting, a big way that will affect our climate change is because with these glaciers melting, there will be a lot of carbon and methane released in large amounts. And those are major greenhouse effects. And so because of that, there's no way that we're going to be able to not have the glaciers melt. So with that being said, he says that there's no escaping it. And he quotes that the concern is not whether global warming exists or how we might prevent it, but how we are going to adapt to life in the hot world that humans have created, even though it's not maybe us currently who are creating it, which we are. He talks about how this is just something we need to deal with. And he talks about the Anthropocene. So the Anthropocene is two Greek words put together. Anthropos meaning human and scene meaning new. So human new. So when you come and think about human new, what's human new to him? He means that we are going to enter the stage where humans will no longer be able to live in the luxury that they live now. They won't be able to live in the same way. They won't be able to practice all these capitalist ways of living. We're not going to be able to continue driving our cars. We're not going to be able to enjoy the weather. No, sea levels will rise, temperatures will keep getting hotter, and people will no longer learn how to live in that. He also tells us how this is something that will never change. We cannot prevent this from happening. So instead of us panicking, we need to learn how to live with it. When I read more of this, I figured out that this is pretty much his way of saying that history repeats itself, because he talks about how 56 million years ago, the Paleocene Anthropocene thermal maximum, that was an era where it was extremely hot, and there were also similar sea level risings. And so to me, I was reading it like, okay, this is probably history repeating itself. And so because we humans are going to be living in this Anthropocene, the question of individual morality is no longer in question, because we have to learn to die not as individuals but as a civilization. And then again, he links us back to his experiences in Iraq, and he talks about how he was scared shitless to be a soldier and face death on a daily living. But he picked up a book that talked about how you should meditate death, and you should meditate, ridding yourself fear of death, because death happens, and because of the climate change around us as a human civilization will most likely disappear at some point. And so we need to learn how to accept that. We shall not panic. And our future will depend on our ability to confront it, again, not with panic or denial or outrage, but with patience, reflection, and love. And we can do that by accepting death. And if we would want to learn in this Anthropocene that he's talking about, new human life that we're going to be facing, we need to first learn how to die, not as individuals, but as a civilization. The part 2 of the reading also was really enlightening, because he comforted me kind of in telling us how the earth was made not by God. I'm not with his way of writing, I can tell that he's not really religious, because he says, no hand guided the acceleration of gas and dust that formed out our sphere, and the dust itself did not intend to become a body. But he does say how we are machines of machines in machines, and how life is a flow, and death is nothing more than the act of passing from one pattern into another. So we should not fear death, but we should accept it, because it is a pattern that this life flow has introduced itself more than 1 billion years ago with the creation of Earth. He also does introduce to us that this has changed once Greek poets started making a difference between human will and natural force. And so human will is humans developing their social networks, languages, consciousness, and culture. But the natural force is the life and the pattern, and okay, so the earth was made, animals appeared, Homo sapiens appeared. We did not build ourselves. Like, Homo sapiens came up because this is just the flow and the cycle of life. And so basically he says that we cannot change anything in our pattern. We can't control the pattern. We need to just understand the pattern, and the pattern is that us as a human civilization, we will die, and we should not fear death. And our lives, our death is probably going to evolve into ongoing, continued patterns that will keep going on. And it's not anything that we're gonna change, so we must understand it. So basically that's it. I think his ending of his coming home was another big plot twist, and he says that the only practical question remaining is whether we, existing as we are, will be that light that we will, like, you know, because he was talking about how we can see the lights of other galaxies 13.5 billion light years away. We can still see that light if we're, you know, in the desert somewhere looking at the sky. We see that light, and he says that that light, our death, is probably going to be that light, because our death will continue elsewhere. We will continue elsewhere. So for now, we shouldn't panic with the climate change that's happening, and we should just accept it for what it is. Now, I appreciate you guys listening to this summary that I had of Roy Scranton, and instead of me asking you the questions here and now, I will post them instead, so the discussion can go, again, like Roy Scranton said, in this flowy pattern. So yeah, I hope you guys stay safe. I hope you guys did enjoy the reading. I think if you didn't do the reading, I think you should, because it was eye-opening, and it was kind of comforting reading something like this during times like this COVID-19 that we're in. I hope everyone stays safe. Thank you for listening.